Are the Heat interested in a trade for John Collins? We break down the latest news on a possible deal for the Hawks forward, the pros, the cons, and if Collins could be the missing piece in Miami's quest for a title on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your Monday to Friday podcast on the Miami Heat. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil, talking about the reports and rumors linking the Miami Heat to John Collins, who is reportedly on the trade block for the Hawks, has been basically since he signed this extension. So let's just jump right in, David, into the pros and the cons and what a trade might look like. We're going to hit all of those topics. But first, David, just where are you at generally on John Collins as a player, just sort of in a vacuum?
Not high, to be honest with you. He is on paper, like if you were to describe what might be the perfect fit next to Bam, it's somebody along the same lines as John Collins. He's got the right size. In theory, he has the ability to stretch the floor, although he struggled from the three this season and hasn't been a reliable three-point shooter throughout his career. But he also has the kind of athleticism, the ability to get to the hoop, to sky as a lob threat, et cetera, that makes him very complementary alongside Bam Adebayo from an offensive perspective. He's also young, so you could continue to develop him. And that makes a lot of sense. He's a South Florida native, having spent some time here. I believe his mom was in the military. She was stationed in South Florida, so there's some ties here. And he's part of that same draft class as Bam Adebayo. He's also 25 years old, so it makes a lot of sense to bring in a player like that that could be part of Miami's core moving forward. But defensively, there are concerns, although we talked before that maybe there's the possibility that Miami could continue to develop him in that regard and he can improve defensively. If that's the case, then he, again, sounds like the right fit alongside Bam. He just hasn't done anything throughout his career to justify that just yet. There's still a lot of potential there that I think has been untapped. And whether it's because his role has been marginalized in Atlanta, because he hasn't had the right coaching structure, because he just hasn't had the right teammates to surround him and maximize what talents he does have, we're just kind of guessing at whether or not he could ultimately be as complimentary as he seems to be on paper next to a guy like Bam Adebayo and as part of this Heat roster.
All right, so I've kind of gone back and forth with John Collins over the last few years. I know the Miami Heat really liked John Collins during the draft that you mentioned. They just didn't like him as much as they liked Bam Adebayo, but it wasn't...
With good reason.
Yeah, it worked out. But they liked him. They liked him quite a bit, and if Bam wasn't there, who knows, depending on who else was available, maybe they end up taking John Collins, and who knows what it looks like. But I kind of ended up... I think I'm more on the pro John Collins side now than I think most people are. I think I like him more than majority does at this point, where I think in the past I was probably more anti-John Collins than majority. But now, look, he's a good floor spacer. I know that he's not shooting really well right now from three-point range, but I just think that that's more to do with his role on the Hawks, to your point, maybe being marginalized there a little bit, all the drama surrounding Atlanta, the fact that he's not really a core piece of the offense anymore. I don't know, maybe it's a motivation thing on his, I don't know. I know he's a better shooter than 24% from three-point range this year. I know that. And so you look at him shoot and it looks good. It's just not going in as much. So I'm not worried about the shooting with him. You're talking about the on-paper fit next to Bam Adebayo. I think it works. Look, he's super athletic. He's ridiculously athletic. He's a great rebounder. Defensively, he's gotten better over the last couple of years. I really like none of these advanced defensive metrics are perfect. I think the best one is sort of the dunks and threes. You go to dunksandthrees.com. You could sort of sort by their defensive estimated box plus minus stat. And I think they do the best job of sort of combining all the relevant stats and combining it into one overall grade. And they actually have John Collins as a positive grade. And you look at some of the other advanced metrics, and he's grading out more positively than he had 2 and 3 years ago. I watched him in the playoffs last year, David. He was not the reason why the Atlanta Hawks lost that series and got crushed in that series. That was a Trae Young problem. That was a DeAndre Hunter problem. Like, that was an issue with the rest of the role guys. I actually thought John Collins played pretty good overall in that series. So I have started to come the other way around on John Collins. And I'll say this also, just about John Collins as a trade candidate going into the February 9th trade deadline. Last year it was Aaron Gordon. The year before that it was Andrew Wiggins. I think every year you have a distressed asset who's super athletic, lottery pick kind of guy, who might be in the wrong situation, in a bad role, and whose trade value is as low as it has been since that player's been in the NBA, and then that player gets moved to a good organization with pillars in place, and ends up thriving in a more specified, more limited role, and with less expectations than the team that drafted him. And so I think with Wiggins, it worked out in Golden State. With Gordon, we're seeing it working out in Denver right now. I think John Collins, he's as athletic as Andrew Wiggins and Aaron Gordon are. Like, these guys are so uber talented that if you just harness those skills in the right way, they could be very positive contributors. And so I think whether it's on the Miami Heat or another team that's not dealing with some of this drama that Atlanta just can't seem to get away from, I think Collins could thrive on the right team. Now, whether or not the Miami Heat are the right team is something that it's worth getting into. So let's talk about that. The pros of John Collins and his potential fit on the Miami Heat, okay? So like I just said, the jumper is going to come back. You need, next to Bam in the front court, somebody that can shoot, because he's not shooting from three-point range. He's spacing the floor from like 10 to 14 feet, not really from the three-point line at all. So you need somebody that can at least space the floor from three-point range next to him. We saw it with Jay Crowder, Kelly Olynyk, Myers Leonard, PJ Tucker. Go down the line. That's sort of just an essential part of a front court partner for Bam, even Caleb Martin now. The rebounding thing is something that I think the Heat have not really had outside of PJ Tucker. And John Collins' rebounding numbers, like his rebounding rates, blow PJ Tucker out of the water, right? PJ Tucker is more of like an opportunist rebounder. John Collins is an all-the-time, let me go get that ball type rebounder. That would be huge for this team. The Heat have always been a poor rebounding team. He's improved defensively, like I said. And I have one more thing that I want to get to that would be a specific, awesome little instrument that the Heat could use in John Collins' game, but I'm going to put a pin in that. What are your thoughts on the pros for John Collins in terms of a fit with Miami?
No, I think the age is certainly a positive consideration. I like the Aaron Gordon comp. Something that we tend to overlook as fans of the game is the challenges that these players have when they go into bad organizations that are so unstable. And we've talked about this before, and I've talked to players about it in the Heat organization. And that's the thing that always stands out about what Heat culture actually is. It's stability, it's accountability, it's an understanding of what your role is and the expectation that you have to work hard to fulfill that role, and you'll get paid as a result, which is why UD is so valuable, et cetera. So there's a lot to break down that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it reminds me quickly just of something that Draymond Green told me like 3 years ago. This was when the Warriors were sort of sifting through new guys after Kevin Durant left, and Marquise Chris was having a moment for them. And obviously, we know Marquise Chris's history, and we were asking Draymond as reporters about it. And Draymond said it. He's like, nobody ever blames the organization. They're always so quick to blame the 18, 19, 20-year-old kid who comes in and doesn't really know what he's doing, and all he knows is bad organizations. And you put Marquise Chris on a team like the Warriors, and all of a sudden he starts thriving in a role. And that, again, that you see that with Andrew Wiggins going from Minnesota to Golden State too. So obviously Chris was not one of the guys that hung around in Golden State for the championship run, but he played pretty well for them. So to your point, it's a good one. It's a real one, and it's one that gets overlooked way too often.
Yeah. Gordon in Orlando, having covered that team, like a constant carousel of coaches, different expectations. Like, I remember when Frank Vogel was fired after one season. Steve Clifford was there for a second year. And Gordon was like, this is the first time in my career that I've had a coach for consecutive seasons where I don't have to relearn a playbook. And that's insane. And then you go to the stability of Denver. Like you said, you've got Jamal Murray's been there for a while. You've got the MVP and Jokic, excuse me.
Maybe one day Jokic.
You've got Michael Malone, who's, very, very stable, et cetera. They know what they're doing there, and he's thrived. And as a result, he's a borderline all-star, if not a legitimate all-star this season.
And this could happen with John Collins. Look, I mean, his trade value has never been lower. It's never been lower right now. So if you're a believer in just the talent level, the overall skill level with John Collins, it's at least worth investigating what that trade might look like and how he could impact your team. And then asking yourself, okay, if we want to trade for John Collins, what kind of role do we envision him playing? I want to talk about that here in a second. We're going to get to that on the other side. But first, David, tell the listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your posts in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Let's dive into some of the pros and cons of a potential John Collins fit on the Miami Heat. So like I just said, if you're the Heat and you're trading for John Collins, or you're investigating maybe making an offer there, you're going to ask yourself, all right, what role do we envision John Collins playing for us? Because it's got to be probably a different role than what he's doing right now for Atlanta, because it's not working right now for Atlanta. To your point, he's been marginalized, sort of just standing in the corner. I think a lot of bigs come to Miami, PJ Tucker, guys like this, and they do just sort of end up standing in the corner a little bit. They didn't add some stuff onto PJ Tucker's game a little bit, but overall, John Collins is so athletic and so skilled, and there's so much upside there that you'd like to harness that. And so what I think is, obviously the floor spacing part of it would be huge, but he's athletic enough where you can actually even run him off of screens and stuff. He'd obviously be a roll threat. He's a lob threat. All these things. Now you're incorporating all that. You're incorporating the rebounding part. I think you could be, like PJ Tucker was, interchangeable with Bam offensively, where you could put him in the box. He can box out, rebound for you. He could get putbacks and things like that. All stuff that Miami is missing, right? Just sort of those easy points in the middle of the game off of a putback or a dunk or something like that. So I'm also looking at Miami's core. I think it's fair to say, let's just hypothetically put John Collins in it, that the core would be Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler, John Collins, and Bam Adebayo, if you're sort of looking at a core four that you're building on for the next several years. All right, well, you look at their specific duties and skills. Bam is sort of your paint scorer, defensive player. Jimmy Butler is sort of your drive, crash the paint, defensive player, two-way guy. Tyler Herro, floor spacer / playmaker. And then Collins, also a floor spacer and a rebounder. So you're also just sort of checking all the boxes. Okay, playmaking, check. Floor spacing, check. Defense, check. Rebounding, check. All these things that a good team has certain balances of. So, like, he sort of fills in some needs. And on Miami, I think all he would be asked to do is, hey, run the floor hard, make open threes, because they're going to be there for you. When our guys drive and kick and create for you. Make those open threes, run the floor hard, rebound, and then just do your best defensively. Just play hard, man. Just be a super athletic hustle guy who makes open shots. I don't know. If he gets traded, who's to say that he wouldn't buy into that?
You could do so much more for him that you did with like PJ Tucker or that you're able to do with Caleb now, because he presents as such a big target. Like, you can run screen and roll with him. He can
Yes.
slip the screen, dive to the rim, and he's such a legit lob threat. Like, and even I would say probably even a better lob threat than Bam Adebayo.
Oh,
We've
no
already
question.
seen how dangerous. We've already seen how dangerous Bam could be as a lob threat, or even just as a guy who.
No, John Collins is
rim.
like 99th percentile lob. There's not many who dunk better than John Collins. So yeah,
he's a former slam dunk competitor for what that's worth, but we know that he has that athleticism even at 25. So that hasn't degraded by any stretch of the imagination. You can run horn sets with him and Bam out there where you have to pick your poison. You can do so much, multiple screens, things of that sort. You can get him free of the basket. And look, he can be positioned out in the corner, but we've also seen Caleb play that role where he can cut to the rim along the baseline, and all of a sudden you've got Tyler Herro or Bam. Let's say Bam is out there and he gets, if somebody comes up on him, a big comes up on him, all of a sudden he's dishing to
I'm so glad you brought that up.
John Collins, and that makes so much. It could be a very fluid offense.
They don't. That's the thing that I wanted to get to before that I teased at. They don't have that guy. Caleb Martin is more of a north to south dunker in like fast break, but he's not dunking through traffic in a half court set from the baseline. He doesn't provide that big target for a lob, like for Tyler Herro or Bam Adebayo or Jimmy or Kyle Lowry to throw that lob. Like that's not Caleb Martin. He's not soaring over bigger defenders and get. That's not what he does. He doesn't do that. He dunks in other ways. Like I said, north south fast break. That's his mode of transportation, so to speak. But for John Collins, it's so easy to picture Bam Adebayo in that short roll running. Let's call it pick and roll with Tyler Herro. Bam sets the pick for Tyler. Tyler pocket pass to Bam. And then Bam, and then like you said, that big comes up to press on Bam because we know that they're respecting that 14-footer now. They come up foul line to press Bam, and then you've got John Collins putting his hand up, running along the baseline. He just jumps up and Bam just hits him with the lob. The Heat don't have that option right now. They don't have that big target that's not Bam Adebayo. That's going to unlock levels of Bam. That way, it's going to leverage this newfound skill that Bam is apparently a 52% shooter from the non-restricted paint area. Like that adds layers and counters to that we're already starting to see Bam implement, and this would be a new thing for him to include. I think the Heat would really benefit. That doesn't even need to be from John, but any player who could provide that kind of lob threat target for Bam out of the short roll. That would be a whole other level of this offense. And if you could bring John Collins in and just feed him easy points like that, who's not going to have a good time doing that? So I think that would be huge, and I think it would be so important for this offense, by the way, that whether it's John Collins or not, it's something that over at this deadline or this coming offseason is something that they should look to try to acquire, however they can do it. Let's talk about some cons. We mentioned the three-point shooting; it's down. I don't see that it's that big of a deal, but you also look at his corner threes. He's gone from 40% 3 years ago to 37.5% last year to 35% on corner threes. What's the reason for that? I don't really know. Was the 40% year an anomaly? Is the trend down an issue? I don't know. That's something that the scout work and homework would have to look into. Very limited.
Like you can't. Like he was shooting the same number of attempts last year, and has been throughout. He's been pretty consistent, hovering like around three and a half, somewhere around, and shooting 40%. 40%, 36% last season, 24% this year. Like there has to be some kind of an injury, and you wonder with a player like that.
Injury. Oh, I'm
sorry.
I didn't think of an injury. To me, I just see that correlating with good times in Atlanta and bad times in Atlanta, and maybe it's a cry for help, David. It's a cry for help.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's again with the constant trade talk and everything else like that they might be kind of squashing the reporting surrounding any injury. But with a high flyer dunker like that, we've seen this with Bam, like the wrist, the hand, all that has to go through some tremendous punishment. And I wonder if that's impacted his shooting.
Or
this
it could
season.
It could be like a Duncan Robinson thing. You sign the contract and all of a sudden, it's just sort of like, now you've got the weight of that contract hovering over you. And like we've said with Duncan, maybe a change of scenery is something that could benefit the person and as well as the player, right? And you kind of get out of your own head and those expectations are not there with you anymore. I mean, the same thing happened to Wiggins and Aaron Gordon. We're talking about those rookie scale extensions. They sign them with their teams. They're supposed to be franchise players. The expectations are such. and then they get moved, and they're playing smaller roles, and they're starring in those roles. The other thing is he's not a great passer playmaker. I don't think that matters on Miami. They've got enough of those. The contract is the other issue. After this year, he still has 3 years, $75+ million left on that deal. Player option on that final deal. It escalates every single season, so it's very untradeable. So if you bring in John Collins and it does not work out, then you're going to have a really hard time getting rid of John Collins, because that's not just one team that's sort of in disarray where it didn't work. Now, if you come to the Miami Heat and it doesn't work, that's a really, really untradeable contract if it goes the other way for John Collins and it does not work out. So that's something you would have to be mindful of.
Yeah, there's no way around that. I mean, that is a concern. You could say, well, $26.5 million, that's not that much more than what Duncan Robinson is being paid or something along those lines.
Yeah,
I guess that's
$10 million more.
The justification. Yeah, it's that's a significant chunk. That is a big amount.
You'll be
of money
paying
there.
him more than I think you're paying Tyler Herro, and Tyler's extension kicks in next year, which is
Good
something that might matter or might not matter.
Yeah, I think it tends to matter. I think it does. I think the egos involved are pretty significant, and I wonder, look, if for Collins, even aside from everything else, like the on-court fit, we would expect to be a great one. But you talked about the pressure being lessened. I wonder if it would be not necessarily in reverse, but I mean, I don't think he would get that much less pressure, because fans would expect him to be that missing piece. And why wouldn't he be able to fulfill that role? It might be like the move that might not put them over the top this season. If they were able to acquire him in mid-season, I don't think it would be something that would gel right away. My expectation would be that
it would take
more of an offseason. Yeah, for them to get to kind of a comfort level between the two. And
but it took a minute. It took a minute for Wiggins, who was acquired at the deadline.
Sure.
Took a minute for Gordon, who was acquired at the deadline, and then it was the year after the deadline.
Man. You made good comps there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not so easy as just taking a guy. Like, they have to relearn everything. They have to understand how to play alongside Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, and that's the expectation. And he's going to have to figure a way out. So
I also think that we keep talking about this as a fit. Okay, who's the perfect front court partner with Bam? John Collins is specific enough that even the reason why the Hawks want to move him is because he's not a great front court fit with Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu and everything that they got going on there. Who's the best front court fit for John Collins, right? And if you think about that, it's somebody who is defensively versatile, where depending on the matchup, you could sort of put John Collins on the better matchup for him defensively. As we know, Bam can guard fours as well as he can guard fives. He has no problems with that. So Bam is sort of and that's, by the way, why the Hawks drafted Onyeka Okongwu, thinking he was compared to Bam. He's not Bam, but he was compared to Bam in the draft process, and that's why I think they went after him. Bam is the ideal guy that you would pair next to John Collins, right? And then in terms of everything else, unselfishness, the playmaking part of it, the fact that Bam can score and isn't crowding that area where John Collins wants to operate in the paint, right? Because right now, you've got ground-bound centers like Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu, guys who can't score outside the restricted area, basically, crowding that restricted area, and it's basically, limited John Collins to trying to space the floor for them. Bam's not a floor spacer, but at least he's got that 15-footer. He could do that stuff in that free throw line area. That's way more space than John Collins even has now in Atlanta. So
much better passer than either Capella or Okongwu.
Not even close. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of just thinking about that from that side, I think that Bam is sort of the ideal front court partner next to John Collins. And if that's the case, then you start unlocking other layers to levels of John Collins' game, and maybe he is the ideal fit next. And by the way, this whole thing about, we got to find the perfect player to pair next with Bam Adebayo, that might not be doable. So maybe you just get the best fit you can get right now next to Bam Adebayo, and then just try to figure it out and teach those things that would make him that best possible fit. So let's talk about what the trade framework would actually look like. Fake trade time. It's what we're going to get to next, David. But first, tell listeners about our next sponsor.
No, we're done. This is our third segment.
No, we only did we didn't do the Built Bar.
Oh shit! Sorry, you're right. Fuck, my bad. I'm sorry. For whatever reason, I thought we guys were going a little longer than I thought. All right. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know a lot of people made resolutions to eat healthier. And guess what? Built has got you covered. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you, but they're perfect for your New Year's resolutions. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy for you. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. And of course, you can always go to Built.com.
Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. What would a trade for John Collins look like? So let's first start with this report from The Athletic's Sam Amick, who reports of John Collins that the Hawks are asking for just a quality player in return and not even necessarily a first-round pick because of the fact that throughout the league, that contract is looked at as perhaps a negative, right? And so you might not even get a first-rounder. The Hawks are just looking for a quality player in return. What kind of quality player, I think, would be the next question. And for the Hawks, they're looking for shooting. They're looking for defense. They're looking for basically 3-and-D kind of guys to pair next to Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. I don't know that the Heat really have that guy other than maybe Caleb Martin. And so if you're looking at contracts to sort of stack and a deal that makes sense, from a salary perspective, I think the most obvious framework for a trade would be Duncan Robinson, who might also benefit from a change of scenery as a shooter, and Caleb Martin for John Collins. And do you have to throw a first-round pick in there? I don't know. Is Caleb Martin enough of a quality player to get this over the hump? Perhaps a first-round pick that's top 14, top 16, top 20 protected. Now you start negotiating protections. Is it something that's maybe, second-round pick, something like that, that if it doesn't convey, it turns into second-round picks? That, to me, is at least a starting point for a one-on-one deal with the Hawks.
That makes a lot of sense there. That seems like a tough one. The investment in Caleb, offering him the contract, I'm not sure. Well, do you think that that's a fair deal for Miami to get a player of John Collins' value back? Yeah,
because first of all, just to move off of Duncan Robinson, you might have to attach a first-round pick just to get nothing back. Like if the Spurs were like, hey, we'll take him into cap space, but you're going to give us a first. That would probably be the price to get rid of Duncan Robinson's contract off your books. So if you're able to just attach Caleb Martin to it and then bring back a player like John Collins, I think the question would be, for the Heat, do you think John Collins is a substantially better player than Caleb Martin? And I think some people would roll their eyes at even the idea that that's even a question, but Caleb Martin's been really good for Miami. But if you think that you can unlock this whole other layer of John Collins and level him up in a way that, because of his natural gifts and athleticism and size, if he can hit levels that just Caleb Martin can never hit because of all those things, then maybe that's something that you would entertain and possibly do. And then obviously it gets you off the Duncan Robinson contract as well. So it would be tough, though.
It's just the contract that is a concern for me. Like the on-court fit, the more we talk about it, the more you break it down. It just sounds like it would be such a great fit. At the same time, you're committing this incredible amount of money to 4 players, Jimmy, the core 4, as you described, the Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, and now John Collins. And that just seems untenable. Like, the salary cap is probably going to go through a spike once they sign a new TV deal, although there's nothing written in stone just yet. That's the expectation. But you're still committing so much money to these 4 players. Yeah. And I don't know.
That's a good point.
To your point, if is he such a significant improvement over Caleb Martin that he's going to make Miami a shoe-in as a contender?
Is he worth $20 million more? Like, I don't think you can make trades thinking like, does this guarantee us a chance to win a championship? I don't think the Heat really operate that way. It's like, hey, does this make us better enough that it's worth the price? And I think that's how most smart offices operate. But is he worth $20 million? Like, asking yourself, is John Collins a better player than Caleb Martin? If you want to just say yes to that, I'm not going to debate you on it. But is he $20 million better than Caleb Martin? That's a real, and a first round pick. That's a real question worth asking. So I don't know. And by the way, I don't know if the Hawks look at that and they're like, yeah, we definitely want Duncan Robinson and Caleb Martin.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
I don't know that they look at that either. And I don't know how much like they're valuing picks, even according to Sam Amick's report. Like, doesn't sound like they really want a pick. They want a quality player that they could plug in. I've got one more trade idea for you.
Okay.
It's a 3-teamer because I couldn't make this easy.
Let's go.
All right. It involves the Miami Heat, the Atlanta Hawks, and our third team, the LA Clippers, because I can't stop making Clippers trades, as you know. They got to do something. So, and I think Kyle Lowry is a great fit for them, especially because they have those chunky salaries that they could just move around, and it really wouldn't hurt their rotation all that much, and they would be adding, it would be a value add at point guard day one. So Miami gets John Collins, Atlanta gets Robert Covington, Reggie Jackson, and Max Strus, and the Clippers get Lowry. And maybe there's some picks like second rounders and stuff that move around, whatever. No first round picks, I don't think, move hands. So if you're the Clippers, you get your point guard, boom, done. Veteran point guard. None of these point guards have worked. Reggie Jackson, John Wall, none of them have worked. You get Kyle Lowry, relationship, history with Kawhi, that works. That makes a lot of sense. Veteran team, he could switch. They switch everything. It makes sense for the Clippers. I think that would be a home run for them. For Atlanta, Miami, you get John Collins. And you're not losing a first round pick if you're Miami. You're not having to include Duncan Robinson in a trade, which could kill any trade right away because of the salary. You're parting with Kyle Lowry, which is tough. But on the other side of that, the money thing is a little bit easier to swallow, considering that Kyle Lowry is making more next year than John Collins is when all those extensions kick in. So you're not going to be as much of a luxury tax team as you were going to be otherwise. You lose Max Strus, but you might lose him this offseason anyway. And if you're Atlanta, Reggie Jackson's probably an upgrade at backup point guard. I know that they basically stagger DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, but somebody's got to play next to those guys when the other guy's not in there. And Reggie Jackson could play on the ball, off the ball, doesn't matter. You could talk, that's a nice depth piece. Atlanta's problem right now is depth. Their starting five has actually been quite good. Robert Covington, boom, plug him in at power forward where John Collins wasn't, or, you know, whatever. He's an option for you at power forward. And then Max Strus is shooting, at least. You could bring him off the bench as just sort of a movement shooter, a guy the kind of player that they don't really have and haven't had since they lost Kevin Herter. So I don't know. I don't know that that's enough for Atlanta. What do you think? I think it's enough for Miami. I don't know that it's enough for Atlanta.
To unload Kyle's contract and Max Strus as a free agent, that would be a tough one. But to your point, they might not sign him this summer anyway, and so it's the constant question. You know, you don't want to lose him for nothing in free agency, so you get something back in incredible value in John Collins theoretically. So from Miami's perspective, I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. Like, again, and if it's a future second rounder with some protections in place, Max Strus and Kyle Lowry for a player like John Collins, I think they do it. I think they absolutely would. I can't see it from the Atlanta side of it. You know, you're talking about a quality player. It would probably have to involve a quality draft pick in addition.
Yeah, because I don't really know who
we had a more Hawks-centric perspective here, but
who's the centerpiece of that deal, though, would be the Hawks question. It's like, is it Robert Covington?
Yeah, but maybe if they don't view Collins as a centerpiece type player anyway, you're getting one marginalized role player for three role players that can step up, provide that depth, and at the same kind of price tag. And
by the way, And Reggie Jackson is a free agent after the year. Max Strus is too. You could decide what you want to do with him, but that's going to save the Hawks a lot of money, and they've got the DeJounte Murray extension to worry about when that kicks in as well. So from Atlanta, there is some. One of the reasons they want to move off of John Collins is because they were trying to save a little bit of money. They don't want to pay him that much.
Yeah, no, I think that's there are factors there. It's
probably not. It's probably not enough for Atlanta. There needs to be, like, if you could get the Clippers to send Luke Kennard over, and now maybe you're moving Strus to the Clippers in this deal to sort of backfill Luke Kennard. I think Luke Kennard is exactly the kind of player that would make sense for Atlanta. That's a quality player you're getting back for John Collins, who fits a major area of need for them. He could play alongside Murray and Young, Murray or Young. That to me makes a little bit more sense if it's like Covington plus Luke Kennard going to Atlanta, Lowry and Strus going to the Clippers, and then Collins going to Miami. Maybe that's more. And again, whatever second round picks that you need to include to just sort of sweeten things. Maybe that's more of a logical framework that gets Atlanta what it is that they're looking for.
This is a tough time for the Hawks too, because like in terms of like their decision-making process, they've just won 4 in a row for them to be able to climb to one game above 500. So not very different from where Miami is. And maybe their thinking is, are we really good enough to make this push? They've been playing defense at a better level. Obviously, Miami saw that. They had a quality win after that as well. They might be a team on the rise and might be thinking, why would we give up on Collins now unless we're going to get a player back? And
it's a value. No, it'd have to be a value add, right? Like you'd have to be thinking that you're saying that Atlanta would be more buyers than sellers. And so I think you're right. So I think the original 3-team framework doesn't make sense. But like I said, if you can get a guy like Luke Kennard or a quality player like that who's a better fit for you, that would be buying, right? That would make a lot of sense. And by the way, it would also save them money, which is a huge priority. Like 4-game win streak or not, they've been trying to get off of this John Collins contract for 2 years. Like the moment they signed it, they were trying to trade it. It felt like so. It's more of a long-term thing with them with Collins, but I think you're right. We need to rework that Clippers deal a little bit more, but I think we stumbled onto something that works for all 3 teams. We'll see if it happens. Probably not, but that's the fun we have here on Locked On Heat. Thanks again for making us your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now make your second listen game to game, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game NBA covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.